Welcome to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. Industry updates and best practice to promote, support, develop and protect the Scottish red meat sector.
The advent of the internet and online, smartphones and tablets has led to a phenomenon known as digital disruption. Now, digital disruption means that Amazon, the world's biggest retailer, doesn't own a single shop. The biggest taxi firm in the world, Uber, doesn't own a single car. That the biggest hospitality chain in the world, Airbnb, you can see where this is going. Digital disruption has been applied to all sorts of sectors, estate agents, banking, car sales, you name it. But one area where it hasn't been applied much is farming. James Walker is a fifth-generation farmer living and working in the Australian outback. Now, he and his family, at their peak, ran 22,000 head of sheep and about 8,000 cattle in one of the most difficult places to farm in the world. Some time ago, James launched Agrihive. Now, it's a digital platform aimed at tackling crisis points in global food, farming and agriculture, and I'm delighted to say that James joins me now. Good morning, James. How are you?
Very good, thanks, Mark, and nice to be speaking to you. Such an honour to speak to you this morning.
Oh, it's great to have you. Tell me about your farm for a start. Describe it to me.
Yeah, so we're in the most volatile rainfall area in the world, in the most volatile rainfall sort of production system you can imagine. Our average rainfall is 16, 18 inches, and we never get that. We get a range of 3 inches in some years, which gives us a devastating drought, and sometimes 42 inches, which I've been exposed to up here as well, which just floods all our country. So to stack up production systems out here, it's quite the challenge. So we're on the tropic of Capricorn in the middle of Queensland and Australia, and we're termed as semi-arid farming in the rangelands of outback Australia, I suppose.
So what are you farming at the moment?
We've got quite a diverse farm. It's 20,000 acres. We've got organic accreditation and global animal partnership accreditation. So we've got cattle here, and we've got meat, sheep, goats, and also we've got a large-scale solar farm here that we've established. As well as doing that, we've also got agri-tourism venture, and we've got a digital platform, Agrihive, that sort of fills our day in.
I want to come back to just about every point that you just mentioned there. But first off, generally speaking, what difficulties are currently facing Australian farmers? Because you would be in the middle of your winter at the moment.
It's rainfall deficiency mainly over here at the moment that we've got. So, yeah, we're in the throes of sort of I suppose, an 8-year drought. And we've had little bits of rain, which has given us the opportunity to run a few stock, but not to the levels that we usually run them. So we're running at about 50% occupancy at the moment in terms of the size of our farm and what we run. And and that's broadly across Queensland as well. New South Wales, I suppose, which a lot of your listeners might be attuned with in terms of Sydney. That's the capital of that state. It's got a mouse plague at the moment, would you believe? So it's come out of 3 years of drought, and it's had sort of flooding and really high rainfall. And so there's a mouse plague down there. So a challenge in Australia at the moment is actually just production. We're not producing. The commodities are at all-time highs, in probably the top 5 percentile of historical prices. But a lot of the producers over here can't participate because we don't have enough grass to be able to, or soil moisture to be able to grow crops or to farm sheep and cattle. So that's our limiting factor over here. It's actually rainfall. The market's incredible.
That variability, that lack of predictability, how much has that shaped you as an individual?
Before this podcast, I was considering, the different production systems in where you are in the UK and Scotland, and comparing it to here. And I suppose if I had a business whereby I could, stack up production year on year and produce the same or a very similar level of crops every year, have the same production system and the same sort of systems in place, I'd be looking to optimize my business. So, how could we gain the most amount of money per kilos that we produce? How can we reduce our costs? But how we could also produce more for that acreage that we've got access to. In Australia, particularly in my area, we don't have the opportunity to optimize our business because some years we just can't actually produce cattle or produce sheep or produce kilos off our land. So there's no opportunity to optimize. We can when we do have them, but when we don't, we've got to diversify. So there's two options to us, presented. And one is when we do have production, optimize it. But the second one is when we don't, it's to diversify. So I suppose that's how we deal with the volatility and the variability over here. We've got a sort of a periodic business model where when we've got opportunity to farm, we farm. When we don't, we've got to really look for other opportunities to farm elsewhere or to diversify our enterprises.
You mentioned, the solar energy farm. You kind of just tossed off, as almost a throwaway statement. It was $32 million worth. It's not a small thing.
No, absolutely not. It's a considerable project for our region, and at the peak it employed over 120 people in the middle of a drought. So it really helped the community sort of bolster together and stay afloat. It's got 53,000 panels. It's 130 acres. It's a fair footprint out here. It generates 18 megawatts of power. So, with an abundance of land out here, we can afford to do that. But it's quite interesting. It's sort of a counter-cyclical, I suppose, investment in terms of, when it doesn't rain, the sun shines. So we can capture revenue out of that. It's been quite interesting, that journey, Mark, of trying to find those counter-cyclical sort of investments that we can make out here to complement what we do.
Must be quite nice to have something like that, though. Just bringing, I mean, a lot of Scottish farmers do the same with wind turbines. And it's a more or less guaranteed annual income stream to bolster up everything else you do.
Absolutely, and not only that, it takes that pressure off trying to generate those kilos of agriculture that we're trying to do in not depleting the country. Well, what we can do is we can actually take a little bit of pressure off, attract the revenue out of that solar farm system, and then, take the pressure off trying to run and I suppose produce those kilos that we would otherwise be forced to create income for the farm. So it's quite an interesting, business model that we've been able to capture, and it's a 30-year lease, and so it just goes up with CPI every year. And we've done quite well. We've actually captured that model and pulled it into, I suppose, grazing as well. So what we've done recently, and we've been recognised for a national sort of award through the Prime Minister's office. But what we're trying to do is just change these business models a bit so that instead of breeding animals here, which is a long-term process in terms of generating revenue, what we're doing is we've created a floating lease with a retainer that is based on 50% stocking rate. So the lease partners us with a large corporate that's got a vast amount of livestock that we can draw on when we've got the biomass to be able to run stock. And when we can't run stock, we're still getting that revenue, but they're accruing credits for when we do have a good season. They can, I suppose, regain those credits that they've accrued during a drought. So what we've taken out is the volatility in income, not only with that solar farm, but also with the lease that we're trialling. We've been trialling for 3 years, but it's actually going quite well, Mark.
You mentioned too the agritourism, and that intrigues me because that lovely Australian expression for the outback, the great bugger all. It is not what you might normally expect people to flock to in terms of a holiday destination. How do you sell it?
I think you've got to make it extremely interesting, Mark. So I think the outback does have this sort of romantic notion about, what is it? What does it look like? How vast is it? And what are the people and the characters like? It's just that, I suppose, ability to look around 360 degrees and not see anything man-made. The only places that they actually saw that was out here on our farm. So it's quite an extraordinary, scenic opportunity to see the sunsets and the sunrises that are uninhibited, but also I think you've got to, dash a little bit of creativity in there as well. So what we did a few years ago is we established the Outback Yacht Club. So it was actually on a dam in the middle of nowhere. We started up a yacht club, and anyway, the marketing was brilliant. It just went viral and went to your equivalent BBC, ABC in Australia, and then it actually went to BBC World. They picked up on the footage and just thought it was just such a quirky sort of marketing ploy that we gained a lot of momentum with it. So So I think you've just got to keep refreshing and keep exciting people in what it is out here. But you can just see people just absolutely relax when they're not caught up in the hustle and bustle of sort of mainstream city life. So it's brilliant. But having said that, there's a lot of motivated people out here, and this is where Qantas started. So you can create a fair bit of fast-paced corporate activity out here as well. So it's but it's extremely interesting, Mark. We'd love to actually host you guys and your listeners here one day.
I'm sure I would love to do it. When you spoke at the Oxford Farming Conference in 2016, you used the term entrepreneurial mongrel. Explain that.
You've done good research here, Mark. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that term the other day. I think it's just it's the tenacity, to actually achieve that vision. Entrepreneurs have there's some entrepreneurs that have a curse that they come up with a concept, but they can see it and visualize it, and that's their reward. They can actually see the solution. The entrepreneurial mongrel is about seeing that solution, but actually driving to I suppose make it happen. And the effectiveness of that individual, I suppose, is their level of entrepreneurial mongrel. It's the tenacity to actually to have that impact. So when you talk about entrepreneurial mongrel, it's about just actioning and executing. And it's particularly out here, if you don't have that little bit of mongrel, the environment will just swallow you up. So it's that term is about just executing and just making things happen, Mark. So at the Oxford Farming Conference, it was quite an interesting time to introduce that term, because a lot of ag tech startups were sort of thinking about turning their hands at diversifying their farm businesses into some ag tech solutions. So now it's quite matured, and but the only people that are succeeding at the moment have got that mongrel.
Talking of ag tech, what does Agrihive do?
When I did a Nuffield scholarship, what I did was I travelled the world and I thought, how can we make better decisions on our production and how can we monitor it better? So I looked at zoological fraternity and how they monitor their animals, the sporting fraternity to see how they monitor athletes real time, medicine, so in intensive care, and also the military, how they monitor their soldiers and the health of them, and then how could I build metrics around that and link it with financial metrics to make informed financial decisions. So when I came back, I thought, oh, this is great. I'll start a project and actually build this. But I realised quite quickly through two summits. One was out here in Longreach. It was the Outback CEO Summit on the beef industry, and the second one was at Westminster over in London. And we had great contingent there, but we drove to see and challenged the attendees to see what was the inhibiting factor, one with the drought and the decisions made by producers, and secondly with the milk price volatility back in 2016 in the UK, and what were inhibiting the performance of the businesses there. What we came up with was no individual decisions, but pretty much just a body of thinking, and it was financial acumen. So producers are very good at producing the capacity of their land, but not so much producing to perform financially well. So what I did was I pulled back and I started to actually build, I suppose, infographics on how the business was performing for farms. And then we wrapped it up into a digital program called Agrihive. And with that, we got the Prime Minister of Australia at the time funded us to actually build the program. So it's all about, I suppose, making informed financial decisions with really verified and validated data, and really trying to help those family businesses, farming businesses that are struggling to grow, and are struggling to transcend through succession. So the first thing we need to understand is actually how the business is performing and what the opportunities exist going forward. So what we're doing at the moment is we're doing a capital raise to actually expand internationally with that program and turn it into a business projection engine. So any sort of insights or any thoughts that you've got about altering the business, you can see the impact of those financially and project it forward to give you a decision now. So yeah, it's quite interesting, and I just think that if we can do that, we can have much more sustainable businesses and create better farming systems.
In the old days, if farmers would, produce a crop, whatever it was, they sell that crop, and they would know at the end of the year how well or how badly they'd done. The system you've just described to me seems to be much more in real time. So that you literally you could come in, have your supper, sit down at the kitchen table, switch on your laptop, and think, this is the position financially my business is in right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And your bank manager can know, and your staff can know, and also all your family members. So, and also the veracity of some business members, because they don't understand the numbers in sort of changing ways, can be overcome. So yeah, my goal is to actually have push notifications to farmers to let them know when there's financial opportunities available with the data that we capture. So yeah, it in terms of reviewing your interest rates, buying next door, exactly what decisions you can make, when you can make them, and you can know when you can pull the trigger on them. So that's what's driving me, Mark. And I'm quite excited to help family businesses and corporate businesses sort of grow. So I think we do it quite well in terms of the production side of things, and I think we just need a little bit of enhancing the financial side. And with 82 million people more in the world every year, that's a considerable amount of people to feed and clothe. So we really need to start lifting our game. And when I look at some of the challenges that you guys have got over there with Brexit and and trade, I think the timing for this sort of program is I'm trying to rush to get it there because I just know there's some family businesses that might not be able to survive, this massive overhaul or change.
I was going to ask you this later, but I'll ask you it now. How do you, from the Australian side, view the recent trade deal with the UK government?
I think free trade, Mark, is I think it's I just think it's needed. I think that our representatives years ago could have actually had a free trade deal with with the UK, but they were asleep at the wheel in the EU negotiations years ago, and New Zealand seemed to get their foot in the door. So I think we've been missing out for quite a long time. I don't know the fine details of the arrangement, but I just think like-minded countries should work together. And I think there'd be not only trade in produce, but trade in ideas. And I think that's one of the most important things we can exchange.
Sticking with produce, though, I mean, how does an international trade literally halfway around the world make sense in terms of climate change, carbon reduction?
I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's up to the consumer, Mark, to choose where and how they'd like their food. I think it's the responsibility of the producers to actually produce as the most sustainable way as they can. I think currently, we don't really have a framework to communicate that to farmers to say, what's your production system look like in terms of carbon footprint. And I think that farmers instinctively, once they know those metrics and can see those, those numbers on how they're performing in terms of long-term sustainability, once we can start communicating that with the production systems, people will start to preserve their farms a lot more and produce a lot more sustainably. So I think it's about maybe the UK really promoting their production systems and capturing what they are really effectively, and then communicating that with the consumers that are making the decisions to buy. I think it's becoming more and more important where your food's sourced, and the local movement is catching on, but it's a very slow thing. It's all about price. People are buying on price, not so much on the environmental impact at the moment. But I think with 82 million people every year, Mark, I think that'll change.
Price is, I think people underestimate it. They know it's important, but they underestimated it many, many years ago when there was the BSE crisis in this country. I remember walking through one of the local supermarkets and the chiller shelves were absolutely full of meat. Absolutely full of meat. Nobody was touching it. So the people were concerned about it. They were worried about it. They didn't know what the real truth behind the story was. I had to go back literally about 3/4 of an hour later past those same shelves, and they had taken the decision to half the price of the meat. Just said half price, that was it. And the shelves were emptying rapidly. So all the concerns that people had about health were trumped by the fact that this was half-price meat. It was a bargain. It is a really, really strong influence.
I totally agree. And all the hype with provenance and branding and that sort of stuff. It's a price signal. I think that's where the consumer is, because they're making concerted effort to preserve their household income. So I think it's a really interesting proposition how we position our produce. But yeah, that's an interesting take. What are your thoughts on the free trade agreement, or the trade agreement that's been established between the UK and Australia?
I don't know enough about it, truth to be told, James, but I know there's a lot of concern here because almost immediately people were saying yes, but the welfare standards across in Australia are much lower than ours. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's the narrative that's been put across. I mean, are Australian farmers aware of that? How do they feel about it?
No, the welfare in Australia it's extraordinary. I mean, the transparency and the in the production systems over here are just extraordinary, like they are in the UK, and that's why I think we're like-minded, Commonwealth countries that produce to the same standard. I would challenge that sentiment that Australians' animal welfare is low. It's we've got massive regulations over here to make sure that everything perform and is in of good health. A few years ago, I interviewed Phil Limbrick, who wrote the book Farmageddon, and I think that we've got more of a battle to be had with public minorities such as that, as opposed to fighting between nations that produce and have the same sort of view of building a good reputation in farming. I think we could really find some great common ground there to work together as UK producers and Australian farmers to really combat, that negativity that's thrown towards us sometimes.
Coming back to what you were talking about earlier, the Outback CEO Summit, I read up about that, and it sounded fantastic. People flying in on their private jets into the bush, and it was very successful. It was very well attended. What did it actually achieve? What was your goal? What were you trying to do with it?
I suppose I was starting up Agrihive. We're tackling crisis points, and one of the issues, people just had no answers, Mark. They had this massive debt that was crippling them. They had to sell all their stock at low levels. There was no rain on the horizon, and people had no answers. Government didn't even know what to do. They pulled out a 1900 turn of the century document, which is drought policy. So I thought, well, all right. So I went to the politicians and suggested a few different ideas, and went to industry bodies and suggested ideas, and it was just falling on deaf ears. So I thought, well, I'm going to just create something and let's actually see where we can take it. So we built a case study, challenged, the financial position that drought-affected beef producer might have, with CEOs to come up with better ideas on how they could navigate through it. So we were trying to propagate ideas to profile the producers that might be struggling. So we had over 140 submissions with different ideas, and we published that to the industry to show people that there was some different thinking that they could have. And once all the perceived opportunities are lost to a producer and a farmer, that's when the mental health kicks in. So what we're trying to achieve there was to actually, say to people, well, there is a future in what we're doing. The net wealth, although the drought has been quite bad, is really quite fine, but there's also more and more opportunities. You can diversify, you can loan money to buy an investment, a commercial investment house. There were a whole heap of different submissions, similar to the UK dairy industry when we ran the competition over there as well. I suppose the outcome was we sort of exploded the financial literacy term, and we sort of, I suppose, shouted out the need that providers really need to come to the party and create better courses, better opportunities for farmers to manage their businesses a little bit better and make better decisions. So that was the intention of it. The market research we got for our software program was a side benefit, but yeah, we've got some pretty exciting frameworks to come in terms of measuring the output of farms and the sustainability of them, Mark. So yeah, so that's what came out of it. It just created a narrative for the industry to take forward, and I suppose really crunch and profile back to their different stakeholders. So yeah, so over here particularly, that I suppose that was the outcome. We just sort of took the narrative to a different level.
That UK case study you mentioned, the Kidworth Dairy Farm. Again, it's a family farm, it's a real family farm. You were casting about for ideas, saying, look, how could this be improved upon? How successful was that?
Yeah, it was good. It was a struggle to put the team together, but we had great team members over there in the UK. They were extraordinary, people. So they were from the Lakes District. We had a friend over there, Neil Wilson. He's in Scotland that helped there. It was great. The exposure we got was fantastic. The entries we got were really good, and we ended up flying the winners of the case study competition over to Australia to experience a drought and compare the two. Would they prefer milk price volatility in the UK dairy industry, or would they prefer to deal with the drought in Australia? And they overwhelmingly said the price volatility in the UK. So they just said production's wiped out over here. I would have liked to have taken it to another level over there, but just the geographical separation we couldn't sort of build upon that. But I do know that a lot of the industry bodies took notice of what we did, and we're starting to address that, that business acumen for the farmers and trying to help them with better support in decision making financially. I think we had 4 politicians there from the House of Commons and 3 from the House of Lords. So the profile is great, Mark, and I just really enjoyed meeting a lot of the farmers over there while we were over there. It's an extraordinary island you've got there, in the UK and particularly in Scotland. The grass production and the opportunities you've got are extraordinary. So so we really enjoyed putting it together and profiling it all. And the videos are still available on there online, for people to view of that case study. And I think that a lot of them are timeless in terms of the the rhetoric that people have towards problems in the industry.
As a farmer, as an entrepreneurial mongrel, you're obviously a doer. You get things done. How? I mean, are there tricks? Are there things that well, not tricks, but I mean, do you have habits that make you more successful? And if so, what are those habits?
Yeah, I think I don't take no for an answer, Mark. So if I get a no, it just means take a different angle, default to a different angle. How can we get around this hurdle? So years ago, we were caught with a really low sheep industry meat value. So I promised myself to establish my own market to create, to create more value in what we're selling. So I promised myself to make 20 phone calls every morning to try and establish a network of people that might be able to help me establish a new market. So it took me 3 weeks, but I committed myself to making those phone calls, and it didn't take long until we're talking to the right people. We established a trade for the sheep industry, and it culminated in sort of flying them in jumbo jets over to Malaysia to find the market. So I think it's just that if people say no, I've observed a lot of people just accept that and then move on to the next idea or move on to the next chapter. But I think I think I just use it as a signal to pivot and say, all right, how can we still achieve it, but we can't use that that channel. So at the moment our capital raise for Agrihive has taken a while, but I've never given up on it. And if you just keep that tenacity and that and that willpower, it will come through. And so I think that's probably what I'd do differently. It's got varying success, I suppose, but sometimes you do hit a home run, and sometimes you just hit singles, and sometimes you get bowled out. But you've just got to keep moving.
I know that one of your goals and stated aims is improving terms of trade at the farm gate. The example you just gave there of the Malaysia deal, you moved the farm gate. You moved it to Malaysia. And a lot of what you seem to be doing is about, again, forgive me if I'm misinterpreting this, for the farmers to take back control. Don't be supine. Don't just accept it. Find ways of making this work.
Absolutely. I mean, with another example today was with our tourism. There's a stated price on the internet for swags, and I don't know if you know what swags are, but they're a quintessential Australian, outdoor mattress with canvas that you put bedding in. So when people come to the Outback, they want a quintessential experience, and that's perfect. So we've got school groups coming out here now. So I had to buy 100 swags. So you can go online and fill in, 100 swags and accept the price, which was, I think it was $215 on the screen. So that was $21,500. Anyway, so I thought, I'll actually just ring these guys and just have a bit of a chat. So anyway, I got them down to $135.20 for those swags, and I think you just don't accept, if it's written, still don't accept it. You can change things, you can move it. Whether it's with your bank manager, or whether it's with your agent, or whether it's with your supply chain, you can just have a conversation, roll them in a new possibility, and then create a new future or a new way. I don't know if that's, too different to other people, but you'll see people that just sort of try and establish their own reality and fight for it. You talked about Amazon before. Jeff Bezos, he's definitely trying to establish his own reality. And I'm pretty sure that your listeners, if they look around their local sort of area or counties, they'll find those farmers that don't accept no, and you'll see that they've got a fair bit of momentum, and they're on the punch. They've got new technology. They're pushing the boundaries. They're creating new possibilities for themselves and for their families and for their business partners. But the ones that just accept it, they'll sort of just try to stay the same. And I think that's the reality of it. But if people could just check, what rhythm they've got in, their business, it might go well to solving a few problems they've got.
James, I have really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Mark, I'd love to find out more about you as well. But anyway, maybe when the border shut down.
Another time. Anyway, if you'd like to find out more about James, you can basically go to james@agrihive.com. I'm Mark Stephen. I hope you found this useful.
Thank you for listening to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. For news and to listen back to previous episodes of the podcast, visit qmscotland.co.uk. For Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork recipe videos and inspiration, visit www.scotchkitchen.com or follow Scotch Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter.